Hi, boys and girls. I have another book to read to you today. This one is called Wolf Goes to School. Wolf was in our other story called Wolf's Bad Day. This one's called Wolf Goes to School. It's written by Danae Dobson and illustrated by Dee DeRosa. Wolf Goes to School. It was the end of a long and enjoyable summer, and once again a new school year was starting. All the children in the city of Gladstone would be returning to the classroom. On the very first morning of school, when they were up and early ready to leave, Mark and Chrissy hurried around and got their socks and shoes and book bags, ate their breakfast, and ran around in excitement. Wolf understood the excitement because he's seen the children go to school before, but he felt a little unhappy because he knew that meant they would be away for the day. After breakfast and giving Mom and Dad a kiss, they got their belongings and went out the front door to head to school. Wolf sat at the front porch and watched the children as they made their way down the street and around the corner. He kept his eyes right on them, and he tried to stay put like he was supposed to, but it was too hard for him. He ran to catch up with them. And when they saw him coming, they said, "Wolf, you can't go to school with us. You know that. You've got to go home." "Go on home, boy," said Mark, and Wolf sadly turned around and headed back for the house. But as soon as Mark and Chrissy began walking, he followed them again, but this time they didn't notice. Once he got to school, Chrissy went to her classroom and Mark went to his classroom. And nobody noticed a dog peeking around the doorway as Mark went into his room. The teacher said, "Good morning, boys and girls. I'm Mrs. Thomas." Then Wolf peeked in the door and spotted Mark in the front row, and he barked a greeting to his master. All the children turned at the same time and saw the mutt wagging his tail back and forth, excited to see his master, and they burst out laughing and pointed and waved at him. Mark was surprised and embarrassed, though. "Oh no, Wolf, what are you doing here?" Before he had a chance to react, a big kid in the back jumped out of his chair and lunged toward the dog. Wolf was so frightened, he ran right out the classroom door. Well, thinking that he had run home, the children figured he'd gone home, but the adults in the hallway had heard the noise and followed him and cornered him and got a hold of him. But since he didn't have any collar or leash or identification, they called for the city pound to come get him, since they didn't know where he belonged. Oh dear, Wolf was in trouble. He didn't realize what was happening, but he knew that the van was not taking him back to his home. It took him to another place where there were other dogs in cages. There was a golden retriever and a bulldog and a chihuahua and an old toothless hound. Wolf began to get frightened because they were putting him in a cage just like the others when he wanted to be in his own home. After a long time, the assistant at the pound came in with a large bucket and went to all the cages and gave some food to each in their dish. Wolf sniffed at the food, but he didn't want it. He wasn't hungry. For the first time in his life, Wolf had lost his appetite. He could only think about how miserable and sad he was and how much he missed his family. Well, back at home, his family was missing him. They had thought he'd gone home, found out he hadn't, and they searched the entire neighborhood for him. Once it was bedtime, and the children hadn't found poor Wolf, the parents said, "Listen, we can pray for him, that someone finds him and brings him back to us." So Mark and Chrissy knelt down by their beds and asked the Lord to protect their pet, and they prayed that the Lord would help them find Wolf wherever he was and bring them home very soon. Everyone felt better after they'd given their problem to Jesus. it made it get a little easier to go to sleep that night, but they still missed their furry friend. The next morning, their mother called them downstairs. She was so excited to tell them that they got a phone call from school. A little boy named Bobby had seen Wolf put in the van taken away from school. "What? He's in the pound?" Mark and Chrissy yelled. They were so happy that they'd found him, they weren't even worried that he was in a cage in the pound. "At least we know where Wolf is," said Mark happily. So their mom called the school and let them know they were going to be a little late for school. And they started on their way to pick him up. But before they left to pick him up, Mark and Chrissy knelt down and thanked Jesus for answering their prayers. They were so glad that Wolf wasn't gone forever. When they arrived, Mark and Chrissy rushed in, right past the assistant, right to the sound of the dogs, right to Wolf's cage. They let Wolf out, and he gave them both a happy, glad to see you lick on the cheek. But no one seemed to notice the other dogs. But when they started to walk out, Wolf wasn't walking with them. When Mark turned and saw Wolf was not following them, he became puzzled. "Wolf," he said, "what's the matter?" "I understand," said Chrissy. "Wolf feels sorry for the other dogs that they don't have families to love them." "It is a sad situation," said their mother. "Maybe we can think about a way to help them." So Mark and Chrissy thought about it. All the ride home and that evening and on their way to school, they talked about a way that they could help them. They knew that their mom and dad wouldn't let them bring home 6 more dogs. 1 dog was enough for their family. But maybe they could find homes for the others. When they mentioned it to their teacher at school, Mark's teacher at school said, "Hey, maybe you guys can make a flyer and you can put the dogs on there and see if anybody wants them." So they did. They made a flyer that afternoon, and they had written up what dogs were there and that they needed a new home, and they put their name and phone number so they could call their house if they're interested in any of the 6 dogs. One of them they had named Old Charlie and said he's a little old but lovable hound. One they named Freeway, a tiny chihuahua that was picked up on the highway. One they named Peppy, a gray terrier that loves to run and jump. And one they named Rusty, a golden retriever with a beautiful copper-colored coat. One they named Trixie, a poodle who must have been in a circus act because she did lots of tricks. And finally Rocky, a bulldog who could protect anyone's home. They were able to get permission to pass them out at school and hang them up around school so people could find out from their families if they could possibly adopt a dog. When they returned to their home after school, they were so excited. Mom said that they had had 42 phone calls about the dogs, but only about 6 of the dogs. There were no phone calls for the old hound. That made Mark very sad. His dad tried to comfort him. He said, "Maybe somebody will come around and decide to get the old hound." So the next morning, Saturday morning, they got up. The neighbor, Mark's friend Barney, Martin, the neighbor Barney and his dad came over in their big pickup truck so they could go pick up all the dogs to deliver them to the homes. Mr. Martin waited outside. Mark and Chrissy and his dad and Mom went and got the dogs. But as they went to leave, over in the corner sat Wolf next to the cage where old Charlie lay. Wolf whined and gently pushed the latch, but he could not open it. The old dog stood up and wobbled a little bit, and he looked helplessly at the children. Chrissy was almost certain she saw a tear in his eye. "I'm so sad. I can't stand to look," said Chrissy. "Me neither," said Mark. "Well, maybe we'll find someone that would love to have the old hound." The 5 other dogs happily barked and wagged their tails as they went to get in the truck and got delivered to 6 different homes. Then in the distance, the children noticed an elderly old man walking toward them. The old man had a cane, and he moved kind of slowly, but he was holding one of Mark's flyers. "Would you happen to be the Peterson children?" he asked. "Yes," said Mark. The old man smiled. "My name is Mr. Robertson, and I saw this flyer, and I was interested in maybe adopting one of the dogs." "Oh, I'm sorry, mister," said Mark, "but the dogs have been given away." "But there's one left," said Chrissy. "But he is an old hound dog. I don't know if you'd be interested in him." "Well, that's actually the kind of dog I'm interested in. You see, I'm old too. I've lived a good life, but I just don't have much energy anymore. And I think an old hound dog and I would get along just fine. I could use a needy friend." Mark and Chrissy grabbed each other and shouted, "That's great! Old Charlie's still at the pound. If you'd like, we'll see if my parents can give you a ride there." "Thank you," said Mr. Robinson. "I am far too old to drive a car anymore, but if someone could give me a ride, I would sure like to go take a look at him." After Mr. Robinson had left, Mark and Chrissy ran into the house to tell their parents the good news. They arranged for their mom and dad to drive Mr. Robinson to the pound that afternoon, and when he got there, he met old Charlie and fell in love with him, and he decided to take him. Mark and Chrissy could hardly keep from shouting. Mr. Robinson turned toward the family and said, "You know what? This old hound will make a perfect friend for me. Given our age, we'll probably get to heaven around the same time." The Peterson family watched as Mr. Robinson and old Charlie limped out of the door and down the hall together on their way back to the Petersons' car. They were glad that they had found each other. As the Petersons followed behind, Mark wiped a tear from his eye. "Do you know what?" he said. "I believe that the Lord even cares about an old dog like Charlie. Don't you?" "Yes," Chrissy answered. "And if he cares that much about a dog that nobody wanted, just think about how much he loves you and me. He loved us so much that he sent his only son to die for us. And that is real love." And there goes the old pair and all the dogs found a home. I hope you enjoyed Wolf Goes to School. Take care, boys and girls.